We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Alec Baldwin gets a semi-legal pass. Google and Twitter in court. All these things, what do they have in common? Well, they're all about liberty. And to discuss liberty, we are joined by Uprising podcast host, legal affairs editor, and man about town, Mr. Scott DeCosenza, Esquire. We must add the Esquire because it gives weight to your very weighty already opinions. Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right, now, Scott, obviously, the big news on this week, which for some reason America is just fascinated with, is Alec Baldwin gets a minor legal victory. Now, I'm not entirely sure why we care about an actor quite so much.
You have misstated it, Mark. It is a major legal victory for Alec Baldwin, not a minor one. And we do love our celebrity justice
case, I care about it more because it's a major win. But Tell me, what's the liberty aspect here, and what happened for Mr. Baldwin?
Well, this has a kind of an interesting legal hook as well for those that are fond of and interested in sort of more offbeat legal stories. Alec Baldwin was charged last month, I think, is when the official charging documents went in out of First Judicial District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwise, who handles cases in Santa Fe and other areas of New Mexico where Alec Baldwin was holding the gun that fatally shot Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer on his film Rust. Now, you'll notice I didn't say that he shot her. I framed it in the manner that Mr. Baldwin has said, which is that he didn't touch the trigger. He says that, he was holding the gun and it went off. Now, let's leave that part aside. I think that's probably not true, knowing what we know about physics and firearms. But with respect to these charges, Mr. Baldwin was charged with a firearms enhancement to his manslaughter charge, which would have added a mandatory minimum of 5 years on top of any other time. And that is now off the table. So he's gone
just to clarify that, the firearm enhancement is it's a legal tool that adds extra to a sentence because a firearm is involved. So it's not there's an enhancement on the particular firearm. It's an enhancement of
that would be so cool. I hadn't thought about it in that respect, Mark. It's not an enhanced firearm in any case. It is a vehicle by which our betters in the legislature have chosen to apply a lever to people who are using firearms in crimes that they don't do so because of obviously the deadly nature of firearms. So in order to disincentivize that, they add more time. But the problem is the bill that allows for that firearms enhancement was passed into law after the shooting itself, creating a classic ex post facto law. Now, this is not something, Mark, a criminal defense attorney is part of their stock in trade. We don't generally see arguments about ex post facto laws because they're not generally, part of our, ordinary criminal legal practice. But that's what happened here. And it's really an embarrassment for the DA's office because just a month after they charged him, or not even, they're withdrawing these charges because of the ex post facto arguments that Baldwin's lawyers have made, and I think ultimately would be successful at. So the case just went from, worst case scenario, I have to spend a minimum of over 5 years in prison, to worst case scenario, I think it's 18 months now is the maximum. So,
and that maximum, that's for a manslaughter charge, of which there are obviously several different variants. Now, I think
let me just add one thing, if I might, which is that, one of the things we have to think about is it's not just those numbers themselves which color Baldwin's current legal position. Because he's now only at a maximum of 18 months, it's much more likely and more politically feasible for the whole system if he pleads to a sentence that does not include any incarceration. So I think that's much more likely. He's in a more powerful bargaining position, and the DA's in a much less powerful bargaining position.
So the results of these bargainings, they would entail some kind of admission of likely admission of guilt for manslaughter. Is that right?
That is if a plea
if a plea is entered.
If a plea is entered. Now, we have no evidence yet in sort of public discourse that Baldwin is considering a plea, except that I can tell you with 100% certainty that is a conversation that any criminal defense attorney would have with his client, because if you go to trial, you might lose at trial. No matter what, no matter how things look going into it, there's always the possibility of loss of trial. So it's an important conversation to have.
I think from the layman's point of view, I think many people are quite shocked by this, that the manslaughter carries 18 months, but the weapons enhancement thing, that's 5 years. So if you are going to commit manslaughter, do it with any other thing in the entire planet other than a firearm, right?
Yeah. Well, the enhancement first of all, let me grant yes, that's preposterous, right? So why is that the case?
But also true.
It is true. And the reason why it's true is because the enhancement wasn't authored by the legislature to enhance crimes, to enhance sentences with respect to manslaughter specifically. It was all felonies, basically, that aren't capital cases, and manslaughter happens to be one of them. So it just got caught up in that net mark rather than specifically targeted for that purpose.
And can I ask, are there people who are already incarcerated who will benefit from this ex post facto position?
Almost certainly no.
Only Alec Baldwin gets the benefit here.
When celebrities get charged and go on trial, these DAs oftentimes get wacky. They're not used to the celebrity. I wrote about this, of course, for the pages of LibertyNation.com, and I mentioned that Ms. Carmack Altweiss announced her charges via Twitter and used hashtags to delineate the people involved and not their actual given name. So she didn't say, we charged Alec Baldwin with this crime. She said we charged hashtag Alec Baldwin, whatever his Twitter handle is. So, it's...
Well, professionalism is clearly alive and well in the American legal system. Now, Scott, very briefly, I just want to touch on what's happening in the Supreme Court this last week. So we have both Google and Twitter are up essentially arguing before the court against being, and here's the thing, it's many people have been on Twitter, for example, and social media saying this is about overturning Section 230 of the Communications Act, which isn't correct, is it? It's just about whether these two giant companies can be sued. Is that about right?
In both cases, there are people who want to get money from Google and get money from Twitter for things that basically other people have posted in the way that information has been presented. Those companies have said, we don't even have to defend ourselves to that type of suit because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which gives us basically a grant of immunity from that defense. And what the plaintiffs have said is, oh, no, you don't. You don't get to claim that liability here because of some peculiar, I think, legal theories. But that is what the case is about. And if they lose, they won't necessarily lose that liability part. Then they'll have to go fight those claims, which are onerous and expensive to fight, which is why they obviously want to stop the ball here.
Yeah, from what I gather, it's that they're suing. That the base of the argument for the plaintiffs is that the algorithm that somebody would watch then promotes something of a similar value. So in this case, it was somebody who was killed by ISIS terrorists.
Well, it's curious that you use the word promote, because one of the issues in the case is whether it is a promotion or a suggestion or just some grant of wish that if you've searched on cat videos and I give you not just one cat video but a list of cat videos, is the order and the ranking of those lists, is that me publishing new information, or am I just granting you your search request? I
think this is a question that will become more and more crucial, though, as AI sort of moves forward into controlling how things are dealt with in a public face from private companies. Scott DiCosenza, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
And that's almost all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'd like to thank our guests, Tim Donner, Dave Patterson, and Scott DiCosenza, for being on the show. And also thanks to you, the constant listener, for taking the time to tune in week on week. At the time of recording, Jimmy Carter remains in hospice care, so I'll leave you with the words of his Vice President, Walter Mondale, as the two men left the White House. He said of their partnership, "We told the truth, we obeyed the law, we kept the peace." And I think we can all agree that, regardless of everything else, that's not a bad legacy to leave behind. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.